Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much as we are here for Bridging the Gap podcast, episode 2. I love it. So my name is Andrew Nicastro, chief streamographer here at Streamography Studios and a family member to many veterans, and one of which, my brother Dave Nicastro, is here.
Good to be back.
And we have Adam Kukru, Veteran Services Director for Cape Ann, who is here. And this episode is really going to be in your wheelhouse. Okay. And we'll get into that in a second. Before we get started, I'd like to start with our mission. Let's remind ourselves why we're here. The mission of our podcast is to quiet the stigma of PTSD and mental illness while providing compassion and empathy for the life of a veteran. We accomplish this by gaining an understanding of the path these veterans, the family of veterans, and the surrounding community members walk through storytelling, education, and relationship building. I love it. And just to piggyback off of that, the comments we got were amazing. And in fact, we received even some stories. Right, Dave?
The comments were all supportive. And we got even comments of how to help the show better itself, from technical stuff to even what we can share. But one Vietnam veteran wrote an amazing story that I'd just like to share with the, he's given me permission. I'm going to use his call sign at the end. But he said, David, I just watched the podcast with you, your brother and Adam. God bless you guys for what you're all doing. The awareness and conversation about how you're healing spoke directly to my heart. I'm not sure how much of my story you all know, but yours and mine are more alike in some ways than you might imagine. Briefly, my wife and I both suffered with PTS for over 40 years. And remember, we don't want to call it a disorder. We want to call it post-traumatic stress because we can have tools to move through this. So we both suffered from PTS for over 40 years. The result of my time in the Army and the 22 months and 11 days I was deployed with 1st Special Forces Group in Southeast Asia. In my welcome home in 1969 at the San Francisco airport. We met in the 1960s while in high school. 4 days after high school in 1965, I was on active duty in the Army. We got married on a 3-day pass in 1967 before I completed Special Forces Training Group. In 2005, 39 years after we got married, she committed suicide. What I realized today, I never shared with her that I was truly dealing with and what I was feeling. I believed the lie that I was protecting her from all this information. I shut her out from all the emotions. She saw it and she lived it in the aftermath of my post-traumatic stress. And what I was dealing with, the secondary PTS that she got, was a result of her experiences and the unknown of all of mine. I also realized I denied her the opportunity to share with me what she experienced and the weight of what she carried while I was deployed, and more importantly, after I came home. To be honest, I was so screwed up, I didn't care, and I kept her at what I believed was a safe distance. This was also a lie. I isolated myself physically, mentally, spiritually from every part of her, from my family, and I had no friends. This caused her to shut down. Today, it's too late for us to experience the healing process together that I've been living with for the last 17 years. I attended my first Welcome Home Initiative retreat in August 2011, and I went to 3 more after that. I'm also involved with Restoring the Warrior's Heart in Dixon, Tennessee, just outside of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. This was a PTS couples ministry based on my testimony. So again, he never had the opportunity, but he's now opening up and sharing that with other couples that may be going through the same thing. God bless you guys for opening yourselves up to those who will hear your testimony and how you're healing and living a life bringing hope and healing to others trapped by the hopelessness of post-traumatic stress. Lots of love to you, my brothers, from Bulldog. Just an amazing story of a Vietnam veteran opening up a testimony of his post-traumatic stress being transferred onto his wife, and after 37 years, she couldn't do it no more, and she wanted to end the suffering, and she took her life. So it's just very real that it's not just the veterans, but family members as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's near and dear to my heart as a family member. And just thank you so much, Bulldog, for sharing that. And that is a perfect segue into our calls to action. If you are a veteran, a family of a veteran, or anyone that has a crisis, go to veterancrisisline.net. There is a 24/7 live chat. There is a 24/7 text line, which is 838-255, or 24/7 call 988, then press 1. Use it. Whatever you define as a crisis. We talked about this last session. That's you call and let them help you. That's what they're there for. So please use that. And if anyone out there is feeling compelled to share their story, you can email us at bridgingthegapvetspodcast@gmail.com. You can see it on the screen, and there's a QR code there as well. With that QR code, just open up your camera on your phone app and just scan it, and it will direct you to email. Tell us your story. Reach out to us with questions. Tell us what content you want to hear, and we can see how we can work this into our calendar. As you can imagine, the calendar fills up quickly, but we would love to hear your content and feedback because it's adjustable. It's all about you all. That's what we're doing this for. It's for you. Couple of quick shout outs about the Cape Ann Veterans Coffee Social, which is 8:30 to 10 a.m. every Friday in Gloucester at the Cape Ann Veteran Services office. Please go there. Family member of a veteran, of course a veteran, community member, and just build that human relationship, again, which is one of our missions. So really quickly, we're going to get into our topic for today, which is veteran services, and we're going to touch on veteran benefits, but there's so much here, and we don't want to cram too much into one podcast. We want it to be something that our veterans can digest. So let me lay the stage here. And then Adam, we're really going to be piggybacking off of your words today. So I'm a veteran, and I am just being discharged, and I'm being given papers. I'm being given information. I'm being given a DD 214 discharge paper. First of all, what is that paper, and why is it important to our veterans?
Sure. Before we start, though, I would like to thank Bulldog for sharing his story with us. And most importantly, thank you on behalf of our veterans and families for everything you've done to set something up for other veterans and their spouses. Really taking your experience and ensuring, that others may not have to walk that same path. You're taking that experience and changing it for someone else. That's really what we're here for. We take some of our negatives and we try to ensure that it's not something somebody else has to walk through. So, thank you for sharing, and God bless you, and thank you for your service, and welcome home. As far as getting into the discharge paper, what do we do? Well, the discharge paper, the DD-214, that's kind of your experience. That's everything, your military kind of documentation. It's your key and access to everything veteran related. Probably the most important document you get from the military. Everything else, not as important. But when you need a service through the VA, that DD-214 is your key to those services. It doesn't have everything on it. It has some of your medals, maybe not all of them. If they forgot about something or something was added later on, like if you got a unit award, you could always get that added on a DD-215. I'm not going to go down that road of what that is. But, it is your general time in service. It says when you went in, when you got out, what you did, where you're enlisted from, where you got out at. It doesn't say if sometimes it doesn't say if you're deployed. It doesn't say that. It might have the medal from that deployment campaign, but it doesn't have everything. It doesn't capture your whole experience, but it is going to be your key. And you need that to access anything veteran related through state and federal programs.
It's like a piece of gold. It's for a veteran, it's like better than a piece of gold because it's, like Adam said, everything to connect you to these benefits. This is the sheet of paper that will connect you. And I've even noticed in my own, it is missing some things, but I like that Adam said it doesn't encapsulate your time in service, your experiences. It's just this piece of paper that connects you to the benefit side of the military with the resources that Adam can guide them to. That was really good to kind of relate that.
And Dave, do you remember, being discharged?
Yeah.
And walk us through that path of a new veteran. I say new veteran, but you're just being released.
I knew I had the piece of gold, that piece of paper, and I'm going to be honest, I made a little bit of a mistake and acquired my medical records instead of handing them in because I didn't want the military to have that physical medical records to stay in. I just felt I did have disabilities getting out, and they wanted me to turn them in. I'm not saying you should do this. What I'm saying is I did this, and I physically had them when I left. I knew I needed to be connected. So within 2 months with this DD-214, I walked into the VA in Bedford and went to the resource office and connected myself in every single way. Later on, when filing for disability, I went to the office, and it was the man prior to you who had helped me fill out all of the resources I needed, physically helped me.
So you brought up a great point, and that I'd like to stop you on. You brought up disability, the term disability. We talked about this kind of leading forward. It is VA compensation.
Yeah,
and why is that so important? Again, when we talk about words and words matter, we have so many veterans that are trying to correlate VA disability with Social Security disability. So I don't need disability. I'm able to work. I can do these kind of jobs. I'm not disabled. Well, it's not VA disability. It's VA compensation. It's compensating you for things that happened in the service. Things, it could be minor, could be major, but the military borrowed you. In our case, the Marine Corps borrowed us. They borrowed us at 100% because if we weren't, they wouldn't have let us in. But not every veteran is returned at 100%. It's like a lease. They leased you at 100%. They didn't return you at 100%. So they're compensating you for not returning you at that full level. And again, in this term, a lot of veterans are assuming they're not disabled. Well, it has nothing to do with being disabled. It's being compensated for things that happened in the service. So, just to point out, that's a great point that you bring up, again, how much words matter when we try to talk about these services and, how these are being interpreted by veterans of what they're there for.
And you using how every veteran went in 100%. In some way, the military said, I'm taking this person. They are 100%. They tested us and everything. Every veteran that goes in does not come back 100%. I don't care if it was shin splints or tinnitus or you were on a run, a 3-mile ruck or whatever it was, and your ankles were, you might come back a slightly less than 100%. You deserve, and the resources are there for this compensation. And like I said, it came from not old school, but a time when it was suicide hotline, it was disability. And just changing those words, they realized how important it is for veterans to want to at least step up and say, you're right, because we can be hard-headed, we can be stubborn, we can be one way. Maybe I should go in for this compensation because I didn't come back 100%. Something affected me on a PT run or anything doing physical fitness. I should take advantage of these resources. So it's a great point just to change in the verbiage.
A little bit of verbiage, and it's understanding too, right? Like we talk about VA compensation and we look and see how veterans look at it. Well, the biggest barrier to it is veterans say, well, I'm going to leave it on the table for somebody else that needs it more.
That's right.
Someone that needs it more. And, where does that line end when let's say you have that hypothetical veteran that needs it most and he tells you, I'm going to leave it on the table for someone that needs it more. Well, who's using it? And that was kind of an oddball, right? On how that kind of theory developed, right? So after World War II, you have all these GIs returning home at the same time because, the war in Europe ended neatly and the war in the South Pacific ended neatly. And they all come home at the same time. And they're told the same thing we're told, go to your VA office, enroll, I think in the movie The Pacific, I'll use the Pacific as the example. You see all the returning GIs enrolling for school using their GI Bill benefit. So you had all these individuals come back at the same time. So what did the VA say? The VA was overwhelmed with all these GIs coming home at the same time. And they would say, Dave, I get, that you didn't come back at that 100%. But this individual over here, they came back with no legs. They came back with no arms. Would you mind leaving what little money we have right now on the table so that we can give it to that individual? And you, being the individual that just left your home as a volunteer to defend your country, has this mentality already ingrained in him. Of course I'm going to do it. I already was willing to give my life for the betterment of my country. Of course I'm going to be willing to give up my VA entitlement for someone that actually needs it more. And that mentality kind of stuck. It became a generational thing. Again, our military at this point is a volunteer military, so people volunteer for this. It's almost become like a badge of honor. I'm going to leave these things on for someone else that needs it more. I'm going to look for for what's best for everybody else, not what's best for me, but what's best for everybody else. And that was kind of once that kind of bell curve kind of came back down to normal, VA was able to handle this higher caseload, and we're seeing them be able to handle more and more and kind of open up to more and more veterans. And, I like to, when we talk about compensation, I like to say it's a win-win-win across the board, right? So you have your first win. This is a benefit that the veterans have earned. You earned this benefit compensation through your service. If you're a veteran that, Andrew just brought up just out of the service, well, this money is going towards paying your bills, getting set back up in your community, getting established in your community. All right, so maybe now you're a Vietnam veteran who's never looked into these benefits, and you had a decent paying job, and you have a nice little nest egg, and you're doing financially good. Well, great. So what is this? This is extra money in your pocket that you earned. You still earned it.
That's right.
So what do you do with it? You take your spouse out for dinner. You go out with your friends. Go on vacation. You do something. Go shopping local. And what does that do? Well, that's the second win. That is, it helps our local economy, right? So this money is coming in from the federal side to us, our local community, and veterans are spending it locally. They're spending it in local shops. They're funding our local businesses. They're paying our taxes so that we can have schools and roads. And then the last win is we're preserving it for generations to follow. Now, every generation of veteran hopes and prays that there will not be any more combat veterans after their generation, but the unfortunate truth is the unfortunate truth is there will be. And, history has taught us there will be. So we need to ensure that that benefit is preserved for those veterans we haven't even seen yet, or that will come up at some point down the future. Now, if the generations that exist now, the remaining World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and then our generation don't use these benefits, at some point, Congress is going to ask the VA, hey, you have this pool of money. If you're not using it and not giving it out to veterans, well, we want it back. And if money goes back to Congress,
they'll allocate it somewhere else.
It's going to whatever group they want, or whatever group they deem. Now, we have a obligation here to use the VA, use VA compensation, use our GI Bill benefits to show not only that how impactful this is for our community, but again, preserving it for those generations that are going to come. Because if that wheel comes to a stop, we know this, and you were in a different time than I was. You saw, how difficult it is for the military alone to get that wheel going, to get troops in country, and then care for them when they return home. I'm sure if we had time to get into it, we could kind of debate the difference of what you saw getting out versus what I saw getting out, and how long that takes.
Yeah, and they've learned that lesson. It takes them time to also learn, because we had never been in a 20-year war. It was the first time this country and the VA was experiencing long-term war with maybe not an end time or a mission at the end. So they're learning as we're coming back. It's getting better, as Adam said. For me, it was really hard, because there was a struggle even with them when I came in, not understanding what was going on in me and saying, we can't really do that here. We can give you medication right now, but the long-term mental health plan is not set up for this right now. So I just love that at least they were able to communicate that with me. But I love something you said. It's an obligation to the veterans. And that's something I think as veterans we can understand, is that the money's there, and it is an obligation for us to, if it's 2 years or 4 years, whatever you raised your hand, you volunteered to fight for the red, white, and blue, you have an obligation to kind of, provide a protection for those future generations of veterans. Go in for the compensation. Let's take a look at your medical records and see what you could possibly be put in for. And it's just coming to the resource center to take a look at it. I think that was really good.
Yeah, they've earned it. They've earned it through their service. And again, it's not something to say, I'll leave it on the table for someone else. If anything, you're almost doing the opposite. You're doing the disservice by not because you're not helping your local economy. You're not preserving this benefit, and you're not taking advantage of it for something you've earned. Use it how you seem fit. And that gets into kind of the whole health wellness kind of aspect, especially when you're returning home. You don't have a lot of funds, you're not financially sound at that point. And there's a whole nother dynamic. We could go down that road, but you and I could speak on reuniting with children, families, our spouses, and how even that's kind of a learning process. Right. And when you don't have any money in your account because you're getting out, you're trying to get established, you're not going to even like the local bowling alley next door because you don't have those funds. So how do you relearn your family? When you have children, you go in the service, you come home, you've been gone for 7 months, 8 months, a year. How do you relearn your spouse? How do you relearn your children? Well, you have to go out and do things with them. And spend time with them. And, that little bit of extra money There you go. That's what you use
Yeah,
it
and
for.
that helps. It just I remember the looks from my child when I came home and he looked at me and didn't know who I was or was confused at what I was. There was Skype at that point, Skype sessions, and he knew me through a screen, but now there's three-dimensional persons in front of him. And I got the look, and it hurt my heart more than it hurt his. He's only 4. But I just remember that look. I'm like, wow, there it is. This little human doesn't know me. But establishing, not getting overheard about it, but establishing that relationship through dinners, consistency over time. And so, yeah, relearning your family, that's a really good one. And how the money aspect, as it's coming in through compensation, allows you to take them out to dinner, spends it in your own city and community. It's just benefiting everybody by knowing that this is there and that all veterans can benefit from this.
And we've talked about this offline, but finances are a huge mental weight.
Yeah.
Huge mental weight. Whether we want to admit that money shouldn't mean anything or whatever, it does. And a veteran who either is just getting home or has been home for many years, what have you, compound that financial stress on top of everything else they're already dealing with. And, I can't fathom what that person's doing. That's why we have this podcast to talk about that. So I guess I want to stress, because we talked about this offline a little bit, receiving the benefits is not weak.
No.
You're owed. The government has put these programs out there to help you because you are due for this compensation.
Yeah, they got use out of us.
Mm-hmm.
You say we're owed. Again, we volunteered for this. They got use out of us. They sent us over 100%, and we did not come back 100%. The little battle now and the struggle is only what percentage will you rate. Even sometimes that can cause conflict. I know Adam has probably seen many veterans that will say, I rate more. But it's kind of a struggling. It's a wrestling match back and forth with appeals. We can go into this all day long, but it's okay. It's a process. And it's just this process that you need to be guided through. Don't jump to anger. Don't jump to hate. Let's just guide you through this this process together. So
I think one of the biggest things that kind of leads to the stress with the process is not understanding the process. And I'll use a simplistic one as an example. Tinnitus. Tinnitus, VA, it's ringing in your ears. And the VA's rating, and the VA has a big book. It's called Schedule Ratings for every condition you can think of. And it has, based on its severity, what the rating will be. Well, tinnitus, the rating is 10%. There's no other rating. So what veterans will see is, well, my ring is really bad, so I want an increase. And the VA would send something back, denied. Yeah. Well, why do you keep denying? Well, they're not denying it because they're not saying your ringing's on worse. It's because that's the only rating there is for
10% is as high as it goes, guys. But tinnitus.
And they've gotten better at kind of understanding that. Like if you look at a VA claim now, it'll say, this is the only rating for tinnitus. Right. So they're doing a better job at understanding that these are some of the conflicts veterans are hitting. Yeah. But even there's so many different paths. It's understanding the schedule rating. So if a veteran, again, we're kind of looking at mental health here. So let's talk about mental health. Yeah. It's understanding what each of those categories are. So VA has a rating of 0, 10, 30, 50, 70, 100% for mental health. Yep. And it's understanding what is in the criteria you have to meet for each category. So a veteran will come in, you show them that paper, and if they're not happy with it, they may read that paper and say, oh, that's how they made the decision. Mm-hmm. Yep, you're right, I am in that category, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm in the category above it. Okay, then we can talk about that. So again, it's like anything else. Things can get frustrating when we don't understand the process. Right. When we don't, again, VA has that number, VA math. When you don't understand how the VA is figuring out their math, which we could explain it, but I'm going to need a drawing board for that one. So that's something we can plan down the road. But there's a justification on how this all happens. So don't get frustrated with it.
Right.
Ask one of your VSOs. Ask somebody that's been through the process that understands it a little bit, because that is really helpful to veterans. Right. Not getting frustrated with the process.
It's for those of us who have been to war and you kind of operate with a certain type of guy. They got a certain type of lingo, and it's not what the VA uses. The rating board has a specific words and phrases they use to get you to those ratings of 30, 50, and 70%. So as a Marine or whatever line of work and you come back and all you know how to do is drop F-bombs and just your language of this effing hurts and this. Well, no, there's actual words and lingo that you have to hit. When you write it up, it goes to the board and they see if, it's correct. Then you actually have to go in front of them to their doctors and psychologists and kind of prove and connect those dots because they're doing their due diligence too and they're doing their job. So it's like, don't get frustrated when you don't get it. You don't have to start dropping F-bombs and throwing, elbows, but just take a deep breath and let's look at it together and it's kind of putting the right words down on paper that Adam in the Resource Center does.
And when we were building this episode, the analogy you used, Adam, that really stuck with me as someone that doesn't know this process whatsoever and is not very familiar with this at all. As a family member of a veteran, I am unfamiliar with all of this. Right. But you use the analogy of like taxes.
Yeah.
We go to accountants for a reason because I don't know how to do my taxes. And there are QuickBooks or whatever they have online. I don't like using any of them because I feel like I'm not getting the full benefit. So, which I guess brings me back to the point of the process is if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't understand, reaching out to a veteran services officer like yourself. So if someone's coming to you, Adam, what are some tips, or if you come to me, bring your DD-214, what else should they bring to you? What should they come with a mindset? I don't know, but
yeah, I appreciate it. I'd like to go back there for a second because I appreciate you bringing up, again, being there to bring Dave and I back to say, everybody watching this doesn't understand what that is or may not be a veteran and understand what we're talking about and, the analogy of it. So, it's, this program was designed by the federal government to assist veterans financially. When you look at these forms, they look exactly like the tax forms. They have the little thing that says this form will probably take you approximately 10 minutes. Okay, if you understand which form, but that and it's a great program, but the federal government didn't do a great job of getting it out there. Kind of like taxes, you don't know, your 1099 and this easy form and that 1046. You just need these 10 forms. Taxes is super easy. You can do it yourself. Then you have to know the forms, what goes in there, what you can deduct, what you can add, how many claims, how many claim dependents you have, how many deductions you're gonna. It's same thing. These forms are the same way. So the state of Massachusetts liked the fact that the federal government put this out there, but didn't agree with the process. So in Massachusetts law, they said, we want somebody there in the communal levels to be able there to assist the veteran with these claims. So we are there to kind of be that helping hand to the veteran. So you could do these VA forms all by yourself. Or you could come to a veteran service officer, and this is strictly for Massachusetts, and you sit with me and you explain to me what's going on and what you're trying to claim, and then I fill it out as if I was you. So when I'm filling out these forms, it's I, being Dave. I served here. I did this. This is what happened. But it's experience. It's experience of understanding what the VA is looking for. It's understanding the schedule readings. It's understanding the process. Again, you would only fill it out one time. I have a different software system that our communities, again, believing in this program, pay for us to have that makes it, similar, easier to track, electronic signatures, electronic databases, things that you wouldn't pay for just a one claim, but our community's like, this brings in money. Here you go. Here's the software. You pay for it and you use it. And then we develop it over time. And then when the claim comes back, understanding how to translate that VA wordage. One of the biggest things we see is, veterans get upset about is no diagnosis. Well, they denied my hearing loss. Well, what's it say? Well, it says no diagnosis. So you have hearing loss, but did you ever get checked out for it? Did you ever get diagnosed? So the VA is not saying denied, we don't support this. They're just saying, and this is not in their terms because they haven't gotten that far in getting this right to the veteran, but go get diagnosis, go get diagnosed, and we'll look at it again. Good. We'll take a look at it. So it's understanding and translating that, and that's really what we're there for. So you're not trying to do the taxes for the first time and not knowing what you can deduct on your house, what you can deduct for childcare, educational expenses, all that stuff. It's someone that understands that and says, asks you about your experience. So you may not even know what you can claim.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sit with you and say, hey, what'd you do in the service? Look at your discharge paper. Allow you to talk. And then while we're talking, bring up, well, how are your knees? You're saying you were infantry. How are your knees? How are your ankles? how's your hips? Because these are commonalities that infantrymen have from just normal wear and tear. If you're in the Navy, you know, how are your ears? Do you have ringing in your ears? Because again, some of these vessels aren't the carriers that are, you know, huge. Some of them are smaller ships. So you're always near an engine room. Coast Guard's the same way. They're constantly near the so you're constantly exposed to high noise. So this may not be something that they thought of. But again, we try to you know, listen to your story and help translate that experience.
Would you recommend every veteran, every reservist coming back, even if a reservist got activated for active duty, to come to see you with this paperwork?
Absolutely. So even if you're going to get denied, fill it out now. And there's a reason for this. One of the stories I got when I first started was of a World War II veteran that still had shrapnel in his body. And he was told by the VA, he was denied by the VA because they couldn't prove that the shrapnel was from World War II.
Right.
I would assume if I started, that was probably in the 90s or 2000s. Okay. Now, maybe they've probably changed since then. They've developed, but at that point, they denied him because they couldn't prove it.
Right.
So there's a purpose, and a lot of veterans, especially with hearing. So when you're a younger vet, maybe you don't have hearing loss yet. Let's say you are artillerymen. So today's artillerymen are going to have those hearing muffs. They're going to have hearing protection. So chances are they're going to have their severity of hearing loss is going to be less than that World War II, Korea, Vietnam generation.
I think they just stuck their fingers in there back then.
Maybe, yeah. Some of them.
Foamies, maybe. I don't know.
Cotton ball, cotton swabs, something. They have better stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean in 50 or 60 years from now, you're not going to develop hearing loss. So if you get it on paper now, maybe you are denied. Or maybe the VA gives you a 0%, says, yep, we recognize that your hearing loss based on your MOS, your military job, is service connected, but not enough that we are going to monetarily compensate you for. Now it's documented. So as life progresses, if you now need hearing aids, you know, VA's already said, yep, we acknowledge it's from your service. So, hey, now I got hearing aids. You can get hearing aids through VA because they've acknowledged that it's caused from your service.
That's an expensive cost.
Huge expense. You're talking $3,000 for hearing aids. And then at that point, you come back and we sit down and say, hey, you know, my hearing loss has gotten more severe as I've aged to the point that now I need hearing devices in order to hear. So maybe now they compensate you. So, but they're not looking back that 40 years and saying, well, what have you been doing the last 40 years? They're saying, we already established that it was. And now, you know, now we can easily make that connection. The other end is, I see this a lot, and this is very true to what's going on for our Vietnam veterans now, under the PACT Act, which is a new legislative piece of legislation that has just passed that adds an additional couple conditions for Agent Orange exposure, hypertension being one of them.
Okay.
So if veterans claimed hypertension back here, it's already documented. So there may be a monetary benefit for them to it's already documented. So as the VA changes legislation, you have a path to say, hey, I claimed this back in 2014. You denied it because it wasn't on the presumptive list. And I get that. That's fine. But in 2020, you added it. So, you know, it's already there. There's a path that you already knew you've had this and it's been established versus you wait for the legislation. And this is very important when we talk about spouses. And I'm going back to that Vietnam generation because of the effects that Agent Orange has had on them. The unfortunate truth is some of our Vietnam veterans are not going to survive to see these legislative changes or have not survived to see these changes in legislation. So it's just as important to get these things documented now for your spouses. Okay. So there may be a benefit, a spousal benefit, based on what happened to you in service. So VA, you claim something related to Agent Orange. It's denied because it's not on the presumptive list, but then the VA approves it. And, you know, I'll use an example like prostate cancer. A lot of our Vietnam veterans have prostate cancer. For a while, it was not on the presumptive list. Or bladder cancer wasn't on the presumptive. They're two different types of cancers. Wasn't on the presumptive list. Veterans pass of one of those two conditions. If they pass and it's added, the spouse can't say, well, my husband, well, you can, but it becomes a lot harder to say my husband passed to this versus you've already had it in a VA claim. You've already gone to that physical exam.
Can spouses come to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Spouses can come to you.
Spouses
as well.
can come.
Children, anything like? Can children come to you?
Anybody that has a question can come to me. If we
It's
can,
good to know.
we'll give you the best advice. Our job is not. I don't tell you what your claim is going to look like. You know, Dave, you got to put in this. You got to put in that. This is your claim. This is your life. This is your claim.
Yeah.
My job is just to advise.
Okay.
So again, you know, I'll use a silly example. Like if you came in my office and you wanted to do a VA claim, and you said, you know, I want to claim this hangnail that I got when I was in Africa, and I'm like, you know. Then VA's not gonna. There's not really a service connection for a hangnail. No, Adam, I want to put in the hangnail. Well, it's your claim. We're going to put in this hangnail. My job is just to advise you to the best of my ability on.
VA might laugh at you and deny you, but we'll do this for you.
But we're gonna do it. You know, this is your claim. I'm just here to advise. I'm going to show you what I think and what I feel. But at the end of the day, it's your claim, and what you want to do is going on that piece of paper. Not what I want. It's not my claim.
This is such good information for every veteran spouse to even know that you can walk in there. Family member, as the veteran comes back, where we can be disconnected and fall into a depression and not want to do anything. I don't want to walk in and see Adam. I don't want to maybe talk to another veteran right now. I just need some time to decompress in a healthy way, and this is what this is about. But to know that even family members can advocate, say, hey, you know, do you have your DD-214? Do you have your 1010 easy papers? And just advocate for them to come down and get connected as early as possible, and just to come see you, just to walk in the door.
Yeah, that's such an important part of this podcast is being able to translate to that to the community. That, you know, because we have such a caring community. We have phone calls coming in all the time. I'm calling on behalf of my friend. I'm calling on behalf of my cousin. I'm calling on behalf, because so many veterans, again, it may be hard to translate the difference. If you had a bad experience in the military, you're translating VA services, whether it's federal or our office, being the same way.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything else, or if you had a bad experience with the VA before, you may be like, I'm not going back there. They're all
I
the
picture
same.
you with a drill instructor cover inside in uniform.
right.
They're not going to want to walk
Ready
in.
to yell.
That's right.
Or, you know, different generations of veterans have had different experiences, different understanding of health, whole health approaches. Even VA claims, comparing VA claims to somebody else's VA claim. Well, you know, you come in and it's a claim to you, but someone says, well, that's not a legitimate claim. I did this and that and the other thing, so you're good. You don't need that. Well, you know, that's kind of a misunderstanding of what it is. But our veterans have gone through that experience where somebody's trying to compare their claim to somebody else's claim. They're not. They're all unique.
They're all individual. They're all personal, and they look at it that way too.
Look at it that way.
Yeah.
So you may have had a bad experience in that realm, and they're avoiding that. And things have changed.
I think it's more of the horror stories that veterans can tell other veterans about the VA, right? That it just gets bigger and bigger to a big bad wolf, and nobody wants to deal with them.
Or again, what we've seen when we talk about the VA in Hollywood, what the Hollywood is portrayed as the VA, or what we hear about the VA in the news. You know,
Right.
This is, I mean, COVID was horrendous for the VA, the loss of life within the VA, and just kind of the mayhem that kind of happened.
Right.
But you have to remember how many VAs there are across the country. Some aren't as good as the others, but you know, everything that size is going to have some negative connotation.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen because you can't stop it all. But just because one incident happened somewhere, don't assume that it's bad everywhere.
Yeah, and I love that we have a podcast to say, you know, in using that email, Bridging the Gap, vetspodcast@gmail.com. I'm just reading it off a paper. I'm not sure I even got it right, but you see scroll, there it is on the
it's
TV.
on the TV. Yeah.
Please use it. Please use it. Especially with the comments we got over the for this podcast, the last one, they were good. We got some hearts, some likes, some thumbs up. Very supportive, but we want to ask some depth of questions. Again, that 22 a day suicide, we're just really wanting to get that number down. And there are family members whose vets have committed suicide and whose vets could be there in that place now and feeling that pain. It can be anonymous. You can write, ask questions. Family members, you could ask questions about suicide or mental health or anything. And it comes to Adam, myself, and Andrew. We want depth of questions. We love the comments. We love how supportive you guys are, but we really want to get what's going on inside, that heart condition, that the moral wounds. We want to get that stuff out into the open. We want questions to be asked, hard questions, so we can sit down and talk about it or just write out an email. We just want to talk about all the hard things. So please use that email.
And as a family member of a veteran, I walk this line of, you know, what are we able to do to help, right? Because there are times where you try to help family, but they can almost push away from you.
Yeah.
So maybe you're not that direct help, but that may mean you can be an indirect help just by sending them this video, sending a veteran this video so they can hear Adam talk about the process and just realize that Adam can help them with the process. And there are people out there that can help them with this process. Or writing us an email and just getting out what you're feeling, because if it's just bottled up inside of you, it's just going to build, and it's just going to be bottled up, and it's just going to be ready to explode at some point. We can help you. We can at least be a voice. You can tell your story. Talk to us as well that way. You know, so I
just kind of
have a soft spot for the family members.
Right, and I just want to stress that, you know, some of veterans' traumas, they didn't just begin in the military and at war. Some of the anxiousness and fear came from childhood and possible families that cause anxiousness and fear. Whatever abuses it could be, or if you noticed addiction. So there it just started, right? There's one layer of that onion. And then you get into the military and there's events at war, 2, 3, 4 layers. And they might struggle with family members come and say, hey, what's wrong with you? Or, hey, I care about you, what's going on? The family members are kind of, they want to keep it arm's length. So it may be that person on the outside, maybe it's seeing this podcast, or a friend kind of advocating for them, or cousin advocating for them. Exactly. But it's like that human connection piece we're always going to come back to, what Adam had shared with the coffee social, that human connection. It could be groups or one-on-one. It's somebody that they're going to feel comfortable with to walk through the storm with them, to walk through that shade and darkness with them, so they don't get to that number 22. So they don't do that, the morbid thoughts of the physical pain or the suicidal ideologies to the homicidal thoughts. I mean, it's even hard for me to say out loud, but it's really true because it's in there, you know, the things we were trained to do and things we saw and were exposed to. So, yeah, we want to walk by your side. And it's not just me and Adam and Andrew. There's a lot more people that want to know how to walk by the side of a veteran, how to talk with them, approach them. And it might not be you family members that reach them. It just might not be. It just might be your job to connect, to make that bridge, to bridge that gap and connect to us. So, yeah, keeping that in mind is important.
Yeah, I mean, this is as important for the family and our friends and our community as it is the veterans, right? Mm-hmm. To have this, to ask those questions. So any community member, feel free to ask us a question, and you know, if we can answer it and help you, because you know, bring that number down to 20, from 22 to 21 isn't just going to be veteran to veteran that are able to do that. It is a community-wide approach. It takes a village to make a difference. And you know, if you have questions on anything, ask them. And you know, even you know, one of the things I can say is, you know, when I first came home, I felt very much alone. Like I didn't feel like the community really cared about veterans, and I couldn't have been further from the truth. Probably the complete opposite of true. But one of the things I did recognize is people don't know how to go about approaching veteran. We kind of talked about this with family members, keeping the veteran at an arm's length, because again, they have that kind of mentality of let's cause no harm, right? Like we get our veteran maybe in crisis, not doing well, but we don't want to make things worse. Or if you have that Hollywood perspective, if all you've seen is Hollywood, you don't know how to approach a veteran. You don't know what you can do. You don't even know who to ask. And that's what this is here for. Ask away. You know, it's not a one size fit all. We don't have all the answers. But again, our experience may just be that, like, bridging the gap.
That's right.
To say, you know, maybe try this approach or that approach. And I bring up a story, you know, going back to my office. And so I'm getting out of my car and I'm about to go in the office, and I hear someone go, "Hey," yells at me, and then starts running at me. And he's coming from across the street, and I'm getting a little tense. And I'm like, and he comes over and he's like, "Thank you." And I'm like, I must have had a dumbfounded look on my face. I had no idea what he was talking about. He's like, "That's your plate, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Thank you for your service." Now, if that gentleman ever watches this, thank you. And I'm sorry for my reaction. But it was just, you know, again, you know, and this is someone that's dealt with people in good spots, bad spots, everything in between, can understand the various experiences that people may have. But, you know, how do we go about approaching people? You know, that may have scared somebody else, and let alone a veteran. If you were walking down the street, someone yelled and just started running at you and said, you know, "Thank you for your podcast," you're going to be a little tense, right? And it's being able to understand that and translate it. How do you go about thanking a veteran?
Yeah.
Is it something appropriate? If you have questions on those, what do I do? What do I say? How do I interact? Let's bring it to the table. Let's talk about it.
Right. And that person running it, Adam, if you are watching, like, it's awesome you thanked him. It might have worked with somebody else, but those of us who have been on the streets of Afghanistan and Iraq, and maybe you're doing a patrol on the roads, you're taught something different when somebody's making a noise and running at you. And in that moment when we're triggered, and that's happening again here on the streets of Gloucester or wherever, like he was on edge. He knew he wasn't in Afghanistan, Iraq, but the chemicals inside of him was telling him this is similar or something's not safe. And it's not like Adam was going to take out a weapon at that point, but he was just on guard. His hands might have been up. So, yeah, for a veteran especially that's been to war, there's a little bit more to that layer, the onion, a little bit more trauma involved. So I was feeling it as you were telling me, like, oh, no, what's dude doing, man? Stay back,
Even just as a civilian, I was feeling it. I was like, someone's running up to you,
And it's so important to be able to handle that the right way, right? So if I had handled that negatively, well, then I change this guy's perspective
on veterans. That's
right. I'm not going to thank veterans anymore because of a negative interaction.
Yeah.
Or if someone else witnessed it and was like, oh, I'm staying away from them. Right. So we have an obligation there as well as veterans to do our best in some of these sticky situations. To not only represent ourselves, but the entirety of the veterans community. Because again, when we talk about bringing that number down, if that gentleman happened to meet another veteran, maybe he meets that and says thank you to the service to that veteran that is just at the end of everything and is ready to call it quits. And even if he ran at him, it just turned the dial back just enough to save that one life. And I would have stopped that if I had a negative reaction, right? So we really need to be observant on how our reaction is with the community, right, wrong, indifferent, to preserve that important growth that has to happen with our community as well.
And to just share with family and friends about the thank you to veterans. I'm in a place where I receive it. I know Adam is too. I know that there's a good number of veterans who have come from wars that nobody thanked them. And there might even be survivor's guilt and shame about that war and stuff. So when people thank, or what they've done overseas, so when they thank them in their head, thank you for what? Like, do you know what I've seen, what I've done? It's been horrible, and you're thanking me for it. I've heard that struggle with veterans, like when they finally have language for, and I'm not saying this should keep a civilian or a family member from ever saying thank you, just that when they do it, it's presenting an internal battle for that person, and they're struggling to receive themselves for what they've done, experienced, or they're not loving the war they're a part of. But when they do heal, when they have moved to a place of really receiving themselves and loving themselves and just being good about themselves, it's nice to hear that. It is nice to hear that. Thank you. Because you're at a place where like, oh, yeah, that doesn't define me, what I've been through. That's not who I am at my fiber. So I'm feeling better about, me raising that hand and saying, I'll fight for this country. And I did that. My time is done. So you're welcome. And we can say you're welcome back, veterans, We don't have to thank them for thanking us. We can just receive it. Wow, you're welcome.
That's something I never would have thought of as, again, a civilian and even as a family member. I never would have thought about the fact that by thanking a veteran, it could potentially trigger something.
Yeah.
Which it totally makes logical sense.
Sure.
It just, I guess,
that's right.
By me extending thanks, I feel like I'm doing my part, which again, maybe there is some of that, like you're doing your part, but there is more to the story. There is more.
Just look at the Afghanistan war, 20 years. There are a lot of veterans who are not loving most of them, how we came out. Again, that war doesn't define us. Adam said it in the last podcast. We did this 20 years of freedom for these girls, these women who were able to go to school and get their doctorate degrees. There are seeds planted for possible future generations to make that country a better place when these other generations can go away or whoever's leading that country. But for the veteran right now who's in that place of struggle with their country and the politics of it all, when you thank him for Afghanistan, he might not go to that place of you're welcome. He might internally struggle and goes, all right, you're welcome. Walk away, and he's struggling inside. Wow. Who is he to thank me, man? Do you know what just happened, the friends I lost? And again, me and Adam tried to open that door to communication of, you did some amazing stuff. 20 years of that war provided freedom. I know we don't love how it ended, Now, as they go through that healing journey and years go by, we don't want it to be kind of the Vietnam veterans of 5 decades, 50 years of unprocessed trauma. We're trying to bridge the gap to say, you can get your healing now. We can talk about this now. So it gets to the point where they're able to feel good about themselves. You're welcome. It was great that you thanked me.
You brought up a good point on the veteran experience. Not every veteran experience is the same. When we talk about the different generations, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, I bring up Vietnam because that's the last war that people were drafted. There's guilt there from individual Vietnam veterans that didn't go to Vietnam, feeling that they feel that they didn't do their part because they didn't go to Vietnam. You know, you did your part. You served your country. Not everybody had to go to Vietnam. People had to fill other roles.
Yeah.
You know, if we sent everybody to Vietnam, who's in Germany?
That's right.
Who's in the United States? Who's doing all these other things? It's just the roll of the dice, right? What you got. But there's survivor's guilt there between a whole generation of Vietnam veterans that were in during those service periods that don't feel they have a place because they didn't serve in Vietnam. Same thing can be true with our generation. Individuals that joined to serve post 9/11 and didn't go to Afghanistan or go to Iraq, and they feel some kind of guilt that they joined and didn't do their part. Well, you did do your part. You served your country. Every experience is different. Every individual is unique. Some people translate their experience that they serve their country. Others feel that they didn't live up to that obligation of serving their country and have some kind of guilt over their experience in one of those countries. So everything is very unique. It's very fluid, and it's on the individual versus a one-size-fit-all. We are not, you know, again, we have commonalities, but at the end of the day, every veteran is an individual. They have their likes and dislikes. It's not like you can take what we say here and take it for fact and apply it to, you know, whatever individual. They are still individuals at the end of the day, and we all think differently.
And they have post-traumatic stress, whether you went to war or not. And if you're feeling the effects and struggles of depression and stress and just whatever it may be, crisis, that welcome home to people who have been to war and people who have not been to war. Every one of you, welcome home. For the ones who have survivor's guilt, who never went to war, you're part of the machine. You're part of that well-oiled machine that we all have a job and specific skill set. Welcome home to you. And the resources are meant for everyone, and you did your part. So it's welcome home to your part, too.
I'm learning so much. I am. I'm learning a lot. So I guess before we conclude or anything, were there any final thoughts?
That's it? That's been an hour? You kidding me?
Yeah.
You guys want to stick around for another 4? Or?
We're just before an hour here on this. I mean, but so any final thoughts on the process or anything you'd like to sum up on? I think one thing I heard was claims just always submit, right? Or just that was one of them. Like,
yeah, go through the process. If you're recently out, you know, chances are you didn't listen during TAPS, during your kind of your exit plan where they kind of tell you about the resume writing, the VA.
Yeah, right.
You weren't paying attention.
It's a big party to get out.
Again, you know, everybody's excited. It's you're transitioning, or even if you're nervous, you're still transitioning out and you're thinking of other things, you know. So maybe not being the number one priority on your mind at that point. But, you know, here's some of the things. Make sure, one, that you have that discharge paper. If you don't, we may have a copy because Massachusetts keeps copies, or the VA sends wartime veterans into Massachusetts. If it's not there, or you're from a different state, we're going to have to order from the archives. Now, right now, it's good. It's about a week or two turnaround, and they'll email it you directly, and then you give it to us and make a copy.
Good to know.
But during COVID, it was indefinite because the archives with COVID was running at 25% capacity. So veterans were waiting 6-8 months for a discharge paper. Well, what does that mean for funeral honors? What does that mean for housing? What does that mean for health care? All these things are kind of backed on each other. And typically when you need that discharge paper, you need it yesterday. And that's kind of the problem we hope to address is think of it as a road, right? So you have a road into VA services. You may not need to use that road, but wouldn't it be nicer to drive down a perfectly paved road versus getting to that road and finding out it's like you got to go up and down because of these barriers that exist. One being the discharge paper. Two, there are income requirements into VA healthcare I don't want that to dissuade anybody, but there are time requirements, date requirements, income requirements for VA healthcare. If you needed the service for something something you need right now, don't hit that barrier now. Let's hit that barrier today or tomorrow when you call me, and let's see if we can smooth that barrier out. And that way, if you need it down the road, or later on when we get older, as we age, our children or our spouses are trying to help us with this stuff, that we make it an easy transition for them. You come in my office in 40 plus years and you didn't do any of this, but you can't really remember. You're starting to have some cognitive decline. You can't remember. It's going to be a little more tricky, and you're going to put not only you're going to wait for services, but you're putting an added stress on your family, who's already stressed out about seeing their loved one kind of declining physically and mentally. You're prolonging that. You're adding that layer of stress on your family. Whereas if you dealt with it today and we make sure you're eligible for VA health, you have the compensation set up, we know your rating, and we know where you fit in this whole, all these different services. Well, when your loved one comes in the office, Dave took care of it all. We're good. Okay. Well, he needs this care. Boom. Let's call the VA. Yep. He's in our system.
It feels good that you make that. It just feels good for someone to walk in and Adam's able to bridge that gap, and we're attempting to do it on a timeline instead of like hit that stop sign where everything is needed now. It's over time, and that person is mentally feeling better, emotionally. The family's coming together just to get the resources as well, and Adam's able to guide through the process in the resource center. It just feels good to the veteran.
It's very similar to like Bulldog's story, right?
Yeah.
Like he couldn't affect the outcome of his own situation, but he's able to help others.
Right.
And this is something we learn. There are individuals that are running into these barriers, and they're not going to be able to change it for their loved one, but we can change it for those moving forward. Yeah. And that's what we do. We try to take those negatives and ensure that nobody else has to go through some of those negatives.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I mean, to your point from earlier, but when you came home, you felt like you were alone. Yeah. And I can imagine you get some of that paperwork, and you just look at how daunting it looks. Because I look at tax documents like they're daunting. You're not alone. You can utilize someone like Adam to just help. You have help here, and that's the whole point of this.
Yeah, we'll break it down and we'll set them into priorities. Again, it's your paperwork, so I'm not going to tell you which one's most important, but I'm going to give you my advice. We're going to deal with healthcare first, and then we're going to deal with the comp. Pen, and then we're going to deal with the educational, and we'll lay it out. And this is the way I think you should approach it.
Right.
And you can either say yay or nay.
They don't have to take on that nervousness and anxiousness. Go to the resource center. That's what it's there for. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to, when they lay it out, and you don't have to stress out about this is the mission I need now. No, it's not. You're not in the military anymore. It's a civilian life. I'm going to guide you to get back into civilian life. It's real cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you're just getting home or if you've been home for many years. You have help.
You always have
You
help.
always have help.
Yeah.
When in doubt, fill it out. Again, don't assume.
That was it, yeah.
Don't assume you're not eligible for anything. Reservists,
Yep.
guard, individuals with different discharge types, meaning honorable, other than honorable, bad conduct, whatever your discharge is, whatever your dates of service are. When in doubt, fill it out. Let's fill it out and let the VA tell us, no, you're not eligible. Yeah. Or, the VA has so many side doors. VA's a federal building. It's got doors everywhere. There's different ways to get into services. Don't assume because you're not eligible one way that it's an end-all, be-all.
Yeah,
and if you filled something out 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, and you were denied, doesn't mean the rules haven't changed. The VA is always changing their rules.
Try it again then.
They try it again. A lot of the questions I get, what are the income guidelines? What are the priority groups? Priority groups are in the healthcare system, how the VA prioritizes. What are the income guidelines? What are the priority groups? What are dates of eligibility? To be honest with you, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Why don't I know? Because they're not important. Well, I think they kind of are, but from the individual to individual, they're not important. Right. Let's fill it out. Let's let the VA tell us what's going on, and then let's look for another path. You may not be eligible for VA healthcare because, let's say, for guards, a member of the National Guard, because you were never activated for federal service, so you're not eligible for VA healthcare. Well, you are also an artilleryman, and you have hearing loss. So let's put in a service connected. So you weren't eligible the direct way. But, hey, there's a side door over here. Sure. Let's go through the comp and pen, side and get you in that way. Or income. You have no other health care. Let's try this income-driven way. Let's find another door. It's a big building.
Sounds like a lot of doors. It's amazing that they have that many doors. I didn't know about all the different doors, and there's so many more that you're probably not saying that just come into the office.
Come in, we'll figure it out, and
when in doubt,
fill it out.
That's how that goes.
So, couple of call to actions here.
Yeah.
So, for family members, community members, and of course the veterans themselves, email us, bridgingthegapvetspodcast@gmail.com. It is on your screen and there's a QR code there. You can scan that QR code and it'll automatically pull up your email. That goes to Adam, myself, and Dave. Whether you have a story to tell and you just need to get it out, whether you have questions that you want answered either on the podcast or privately, I want to make sure that's understood too. Of course, everything comes in anonymously, so we can keep it that way if you dictate that. And that email is just a good way just to connect with us and just validate what we're doing here too. Just like Bulldog did. So we want to honor Bulldog. Thank you so much. And that's just one of many, right, Dave?
Goodness, we've been having so many comments, and we want everyone to know that you are being heard. And so Bulldog, I felt this was so important to share because of his testimony is absolutely amazing. But we hear all of you, and we want the questions. We want a dialogue. Again, your support is great, and the comments are great, and we just want the depth inside of questions and answers, and just a dialogue back and forth. One, it affirms what we're doing, if you kind of like where we're going with this, and what questions you might have moving forward. What do you want to see? So we just want to start this,
Mm-hmm.
If we can, let us help you help somebody else.
Yeah.
That's what we're all here for. It's a full communal approach. I can't do this alone. My office doesn't work like that. A lot of people say, your office does a great job. Well, thank you for that. But it's not just my office. We're only as good as the community support that we have around us. A lot of these things we're able to do to help our veterans only happens because of how supportive our community is. If it wasn't for our community, we wouldn't be that great at what we do. It is the community. This is a community approach. So, let us help you help another veteran or community member. If you can apply what we're saying to another realm of life, someone with a different struggle, if you think this will help somebody else, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
So if we can help the community members to understand, the family members to understand, and ultimately, of course, the veterans to gain something from all this, just that rising tide will raise us all up. I love that saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's our coffee socials, 8:30 to 10
I will
a.m.
be there this Friday.
Cape Ann Veteran
8:30 to
Services.
8:30. Yep.
And it's just a great group of guys, Dave. I've gone before. I went once, but I'll definitely be going again.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And it's just a great energy, a great vibe of military veterans and even non-military veterans like myself.
Community members.
Yeah.
Community members just getting together, having a good time, coffee.
I like asking questions, and I want to hear their life story. I want to hear what they're about, how they're doing now, where they're going. If it's just somebody in their 70s and 80s that just wants to share wisdom and impart wisdom on me, because I need a lot of it, man.
There's so many of them, right? So there is now 80-ish veterans coffee socials across, it was like 14 to 16 states. They're taking off. The value of them is really taking off. What you saw, what you witnessed is really, again, taking off. We have one in Gloucester. We have one in Manchester on Saturday mornings at their Legion from 8 to 10. The Rockport Legion's doing one 8 to 10 on Saturdays. Wenham is doing one once a month in their Council on Aging. Let's see. The American Legion in Gloucester just started a veterans breakfast. Their Sons of the American Legion doing once a month Sunday breakfast, which you'll have to come with.
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
We'll take him as our guest. We'll all have breakfast on the
So good. I
on the
love
Sons of
free
the
breakfast.
American Legion, right? It was good. We'll all go to that. But these are things that are established to bring people together, to kind of talk about, socialize, raise questions, raise concerns, talk to somebody else that's been through it, and work together as a community. It's all of us and none of us. We are sharing these, we're gathering these resources and working together regardless of whether you're a veteran, whether you're a family member, whether you're a community member, almost deputizing everyone to have these, at least the basic level of skills to be able to pass it forward to someone that needs it.
Right. I like that. It's just that one veteran who's hurting, who doesn't want to walk in, just walk in. if you're hurting, and walk up to someone that like Adam or myself who could be there and just say, I'm hurting right now. Grab a piece of bacon, get some free breakfast and coffee at these places, and just step out of the comfort zone and walk up to someone and say, I'm hurting. And that person, veterans usually have this in them when they're in that, this human connection part. They don't want anyone being left behind. Nope, none of us, we get that. We don't want to, and some of us feel left behind. Come in, get connected, and let's just help that veteran out. Yeah.
And if you're a veteran with a crisis, there's the veterancrisisline.net. We keep bringing it up because it's an amazing resource. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call, text, even a live chat. So to call, it's 988, then press 1. To text, it's 838-255. And it's veterancrisisline.net. They have a 24/7 live chat. So, gentlemen, that's our episode number 2.
Next. We get to tell them what's next.
So, next episode, we have a little content calendar that we're kind of making on the fly here.
Sure.
But the next episode is
send them a little cliffhanger. What's going to happen?
Go right ahead, Dave.
All right, so this will be the first of veteran stories, story time. I'm going to be bringing you with me to parts of Africa, Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm still kind of floating ideas in my head of what exactly to share. And the questions to veterans would be, how vulnerable are you willing to get? How intimate are you willing to get with everyone out there? But I feel like I'm in a place of healing where my story invokes emotion in people and can get them language for what's going on in them. Did he just say that? Yeah, he did. And it's like I'm at a place where I'm not swayed by people. I'm not swayed by how people think of me or feel about me. It's more for my healing, and it's more for the people watching their healing. So I'm going to bring you to some places, some hard places, and tell you about possibly some hard things that occurred. When I'm crying, it means that it hurts. Doesn't mean anything other than I'm not in a dark place. It means sometimes you see things that hurt. And for me, getting it out is usually through storytelling, and it hurts, and this could be a tear. The wet ones, the guys, you can cry sometimes. There's some healing in that. But yeah, I'm going to tell some stories, and it's to invoke emotion in you, family, because these are stories you've only seen in Hollywood. Your veterans might not be sharing it, and I feel it's important to tell certain stories to get other veterans to possibly tell their own.
I got a great article sent to me the other day about purpose in veterans and how we had a purpose. Mm-hmm. And then when we returned home, we kind of lost that sense of purpose. And it sounds to me like your storytelling, you're telling your story is a sense of purpose.
Absolutely.
You found your purpose. Share it with somebody else. This podcast is a sense of purpose. Taking what we know to share it with others, to help others. And that's kind of what we're all about.
That's right. And I love that our purpose is to not have 22 a day.
Yeah.
We don't want suicide to be that high for veterans. It's that population. I'm sorry, 22 a day is just that catastrophic number that we need to bring this down, and the purpose is to share it through storytelling and bridging the gap. And again, just every breath, we love veterans and the family members attached to them. We don't want them doing anything like that. We want to be connected, because that just really crushes the foundation and the roots of a community. When we see the pain on those families and a brother or sister take their life. So yeah, we do care about that.
And just to build off of your point as far as our content calendar, and this was Adam's recommendation, I loved it, was the format we're working towards is story, testimony, and then services that are out there for veterans, right? That's why this podcast specifically was about veteran services, talking about how to even approach it, the process. So that's going to be kind of the format. Our goal is story and then services to help. Story and then services to help. As we go down the road, that may change, but at the very least, having a little bit of a format gives us some structure to build with.
Sure, and it's like we're being our own producers by spitballing ideas off of each other. But you at home, if you have something, or in the car, whatever you're doing, you can share with us what you'd like to hear. Veterans, you can do this. So again, that email that our buddy Bogue is going to throw across the screens, I just don't want to read it. It's really long for me. Did he do it?
He's going to do it, for the email.
So yeah, just hit that email up. There it is. Do that. We really want to hear from you. We really want your questions, and we want this dialogue. So, thank you on my part. So, yeah.
So thank you all so much. This is episode number 2 in the books. On the 22nd of February is when this is getting released.
Yeah.
So we love you all. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you the next 22nd.